Shelby, how's it going?
What's up, Jeff? How are you, my friend?
Oh, it was good. It was a good weekend. Welcome, everyone, to another More You Know Mondays. Las Cruces first, as always. We appreciate you coming in here. Scarecrow, thank you so much for coming in here. Man, how was the weekend, man?
Not bad. Last Friday did my 100th mail call, so that was pretty cool.
That's right. You had some big books that you showed off there.
I did. People are just going to have to go to my channel and rewatch it. So it's got a lot of views. But yeah, probably the two biggest books out there, unboxing and, doing the surprise thing of holding hands over the grades and, so I didn't even know what I was going to get. So I was happy. I was happy. Let's just say that. So.
All right, cool. Make sure everyone check them out if you want to see those big books over there. The 100th mail call that he did. I know we're going to get into it pretty quick here. We've got a lot to go over. We got a special episode that we're doing today for everyone. It's a question that came up several times. Basically, what are foreign comics? We're not experts in that, but as we always told everyone, if we're not the experts, we're going to bring someone else who is. So we've got one of the biggest in the industry right now spreading the word. And let's get him in here right now. Matt Roybal, how's it going? Welcome to the show.
What's up, guys? How are you doing?
Matt, I call you like the godfather of foreign editions and foreign collector right now. You are just a treasure trove of information about foreign editions. So we are so happy to have you on the show tonight.
Happy to be here.
Thank you again.
No problem. And the thing is, I hate that word expert. I like to say that I'm an enthusiast.
We're all enthusiasts, right? Yeah. That's the one thing we're always learning. This hobby is so cool that we're learning. When we think we're learning enough in here, then something like this comes up and explodes that, before talking with you and seeing all the information that's out there, man, like you said, I didn't know I was a foreign comic fan, but now I'm starting to look at it a lot more going, those are some pretty cool issues.
Yeah, a lot of people are. And, one of my favorite sayings, because I've been doing this for a long time, is, there's probably hundreds, if not thousands, of foreign edition collectors out there. They just don't know it yet because you can't collect what you don't know exists, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's not like, I just picked this up, the brand new Overstreet. I mean, there's not a guide like this anywhere for foreign comics, right? Or am I wrong?
There's not like an overarching guide. Now there are region specific guides that regional experts have created. For instance, there's one for Editions Heritage out of French Canada. There's a German one. There's a Dutch one. The different regions might create their own like price guides or websites or databases, but an overarching one that encompasses them all does not exist. And that's one of the reasons collecting in this style is so neat and interesting. It's because we're learning new things every day.
It's like the Wild West, man.
It's the Wild West. I love Overstreet. I love the articles. I love, the market reports. But Overstreet barely got their very first foreign expert, 3 years ago? And he was my good friend Tim Bildhauser, the guy that helped me with Foreign Comic Collector magazine, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But no, there is no guide. So it is kind of like the Wild West, Jeff, like you said. And you're right, Shelby. As at least as American collectors, we're so used to having Overstreet there, right? I mean, it is.
Yeah.
I'll even
like
take
1972, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'll even go to shows and show and sometimes sell some foreign editions, and I'll get dealers looking up in their Overstreet guide, and I'm like, "What are you doing, man? It ain't gonna be in there. This stuff's way too obscure, way too off the beaten path." And that was kind of what a lot of the early adopters. That was the type of people we were. We, I hesitate to sound egotistical, but I've always been that guy that was looking either for the next big thing or going off the beaten path, not trying to just follow, and ultimately the part of the hobby, the chasing the grade on the top of a plastic slab, it started to get a little Drum. I've seen, I was doing the whole, upgrading and flipping, trying to get better grades and stuff. And it just lost something, guys. It really did. And in this speculative market that we're in right now, money is kind of the pinnacle of where a lot of the hobby and the collecting is gone. And so, a lot of the early adopters of this style of collecting, it's like we found this oasis where there was still some of that soul. Because, think of it this way. Pre-internet, American collectors were creating lists and trading with friends and sending lists to dealers. And you actually had to have some social skills. Now you don't need nothing. You don't need social skills. You don't need to know how to talk to people. You don't need to know any of that stuff. It's just buy it now on eBay or go into Heritage or whatnot.
Right.
And
I mean, that was part of the excitement, when we were growing up and we were collecting, is you actually physically had to go and drive to a comic book store and multiples, and you dig through all the bins and your hands get black and you're looking through the comics trying to find stuff. And it's become so easy now, like you said, just a couple of clicks and you can find pretty much anything. And you know what the pricing is, everything's all established for you, everything's lined out kind of neat and orderly for you. And this is something that is completely different, where you got to, like you said, roll up your sleeves a little bit and say, hey, let's get back to where we were before, and how are we going to find this stuff? And it's not a couple of clicks and you're going to find what you're looking for.
No, it is not. Go ahead.
But I mean, definitely, I guess one of the big problems I have is where to find these things. And it is online, mainly for me, to find them. So it is clicking to find them. It's still, they're still pretty obscure to find.
And contacts and sources are key to that.
Right. And it's getting the contacts. Is like you said, you can go to a million websites and you don't know what you're going to get. And if you don't have, like I said, those contacts built up, those rapport built up, it's definitely harder. And we'll get into that a little bit later. First I want to start off more just kind of like we talked about, what even is foreign editions. Okay. Let me pull this up real quick here. I said I don't have a ton of slides for everyone here because we got such a great expert here, and we know he's going to be showing off a lot of eye candy for everyone here. Shutter Dog, thank you so much for stopping by. So really the first big thing is when we talk about foreign comics, because we know there's some made in the U.S., there's some that aren't. Are they reprints? What are they? So, Matt, really what are foreign comics when we talk about this?
Well, foreign comics, at least what we're talking about, our editions would be foreign versions of our American comics, but it's passed through the filter, the kind of pop culture filter of the country or region that they are made for. So for instance, this image here is the Spider-Man 300 set. You have the American in the top left, and then you work your way through the Spanish, the Italian, the Mexican, the Swedish, the Polish, the Greek, the Dutch. The Hamakamis is the Finnish. The Venom is believe that one's French. There's two Edderkoppens. One is Norwegian and one is Danish. The Pokember is Hungarian, and then on that third level there, the one on the far right that looks like the American but looks like it's got a little badge in it, that is the Filipino. So those are all the different regions or countries that printed the 300 and used the cover. Now, the guts can be different. Remember, foreign publishers, they're not limited by the same rules that American publishers are. They might have an entire storyline that they might mix it together. They might mix it with other stories. They might not use the cover. They might alter the cover. The Italian 300 being a perfect example where I think that the actual foreign publisher did a better job. Who doesn't love the Spider-Man 300? But I've always had sort of an issue with the 300 lettering. I thought it was kind of schizophrenic. I thought that it took away from the McFarlane Circle artwork. The Italian said, screw it. 300 doesn't matter for us anyway. That's not what its number is. In Italy, that's the Lomo Ragno 91. So why do you need the 300? So the Italian just left it black. And to me, it's like it symbolizes the symbiote and what it does. You know what I mean? It's just cool. It's got the Venom title on there. Some countries remove the 300 and put in the words Venom, because 300 doesn't matter in their numbering system. So what a foreign edition comic is It's a foreign version of an American book, and that could be either key, not key, or it could be a story. Because the other interesting thing about this part of the hobby is we're used to the nomenclatures and the rules and what is and what isn't to be very concrete, right? I mean, since Overstreet and you've got first, what they call reprints, blah 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 blah. But these are not reprints. The simple act of translation makes it its own special and brand new thing. And when we first started out at the CGC boards, so I'm one of the first people to do anything big with foreign comics.
Yeah, zoom in on that, because I'm very interested in this. I didn't know y'all put out a magazine. I'd love to subscribe. So
me and 4 other people, Tim Bildhauser, Liam Sturgis, and Ken Worthing, and a whole bunch of support from a bunch of our crew, created FCC magazine. And we were getting regional experts, like this one here. The regional expert in South Africa wrote a story for us here. So we created basically a zine that was dedicated just to foreign editions. And one of the biggest things that we've been fighting since the beginning is what I call the reprint stigma. So in the comic book collecting world, anything that's called a reprint, it's kind of like the Scarlet Letter, right? It's got a stigma already attached to it. So early on in the very beginning, we were calling these variants, but we realized very quickly that that wasn't a right or accurate nomenclature. But foreign reprint isn't accurate either, because like I said, through the simple act of translation, it changes things. It can change a story, because depending on the translator or the publisher, I mean, they would even do things out of continuity. They would chop up entire panels and replace like certain superheroes with other I mean, they did all kinds of crazy stuff. Those aren't reprints, and calling these books reprints does them a disservice. And so what we did was we borrowed from the book hobby. In the book hobby, they're not caught up on this whole, this is a second printing or a third printing. They don't care about that. There are first, second, third, and fourth printings, but like Tom Sawyer or Huckleberry Finn or something like that, first time that story's printed in Norway, that's Huckleberry Finn Norwegian edition, such and such publisher print, blah blah blah. And it's because and I'll do a quick little story here to explain why that is, because you still get people that argue about it. So I knew a Greek translator in Greece, right? There's a famous Spider-Man book that is called the Spider-Man Dildo issue, or sex toy issue, right? And the reason it's famous in Greece and on the Greek back issue market is because of a guy named Vasilis Chilias. He's a Greek translator that we know. We did an interview with him in one of our issues. Anyway, so he was translating a story that had the shocker in it. Now, you have something called direct translation and cultural translation. They're two separate forms of translation. If you directly translate something, the meaning could be different in the language that you're translating it into. So oftentimes you have to do cultural translations where needed. But that stinky, nasty little Vasilis didn't culturally translate it. He did a direct translation. And in Greece, the shocker is a sex toy. It is a dildo used for going into human orifices. So he left that in there, and he tells this wonderful story about how his editor called him. It's like, Vasilis, get your ass in here. So he walks in there, and he tells this story about how, his editor was smoked like a train. Smoke is all around, and then he looks at Vasilis. Can you cuss on this show? I didn't know if you could.
Yes, you can. Okay.
He looks at Vasilis and says, what the fuck are you doing, Vasilis? And Vasilis looks at him and says, I thought it was funny. And the editor goes, he stops there, takes a drag on his cigarette. He's like, you know what? That is pretty funny. Send it to print. And boom, you got yourself the Greek Spider-Man dildo issue. Does that sound like a reprint to you guys?
Well, you brought up a good point too. And I know that probably one of our first episodes, Jeff and I defined what is a variant. And I am, of course, not, that versed in. I've heard that story before that you just told.
Mhm.
I've heard that, and then I, of course, know the story about like Mary Jane wasn't very liked in Mexico, so they tend to cut her out of comic books, and there was even the famous where Peter Parker married Gwen Stacy.
Mm-hmm.
In like a dream sequence.
Was huge. Yep.
But I take, and I'm not sure saying take offense to it, but these aren't variants either. I mean, in the strictest sense. And so I get a little aggravated when I see sellers, here is a Canadian variant or a UK variant. No, that's not a variant. That is just a book that was printed in that country with, that price or whatever, and, because variant means usually you can get more money. Right? I think that's another thing.
It's the buzzword. Right.
And I think that's another thing too, right? I don't know if I'm overpaying or underpaying sometimes on a foreign comic. I have one or two. And I don't know if I got a good deal or a bad deal or something. I mean,
Right. And to go back, real quick, because you brought that up, Canadian price variants, Australian price variants. And the reason why we call them price variants is because they're printed in the U.S. here, and we just put a different price on them. So that they're not true foreign editions, even though they're another country.
Yeah, and maybe that's a bad example on my part.
That's exactly right, because the variants printed at the same time. You've got the UK Pence copies, you've got the Australian price variants, the Canadian price variants. I still believe they're so I use foreign edition as like a blanket, right? Yeah. I still believe they're inside that blanket, but those are true foreign variants. But see, this is the other interesting thing. You've got the same thing happening with foreign publishers. So, for instance, Mexico publisher Navarro printed certain books for Spain. So that would be let's say, Batman 227 Mexican edition Spanish price variant, right?
Oh.
So there are instances where books were printed in Mexico for Spain at the same time. Now, we're not just like everything. You got to be kind of general. You got to speak kind of in generalities because we don't know for sure. We 90% sure that these were not printed in Spain and printed in Mexico and then shipped to Spain. But and that's the interesting thing about this part of the hobby too, is like I was saying initially, there are no hard and fast rules. We have books that, maybe don't use the cover. Like let's say the guts are Spider-Man 300, but it doesn't use the cover. Some foreign collectors would say that's not a 300 edition because it's missing something very important, like the cover or something inspired by the cover. But then others will say, no, it's still a Spider-Man 300 edition because it's got the story, right? Is there any right or wrong way? No, and that's kind of the fun part about this is we're literally building the vernacular as we go. Guys, this is a pretty early and new phenomenon. I think the actual set style of building comic books is actually as recent as 2008. Yes, there were, you'll have your old guys say, well, I always picked up foreigns.
Back in my day.
I've been collecting foreigns for decades. No, you haven't. Not the way we have. Not where we're literally going and specifically seeking out these issues all over the world. We're not talking about just kind of lackadaisical picking them
up. Like you come across one on a shelf, or you find it somewhere in eBay, I'll pick one up. You're talking about full-blown diving into that niche and really like cultivating those rapport, building those connections. You're doing a lot more than just, the casual passerby, grab something.
Jeff, ask me how many American books I've bought this year.
How many American books have you bought, Matt?
A total of 2.
Which 2? Now we want to know which 2.
What was it? It was a Daredevil Miller, with the gun.
Yep.
And then the other one was a biggie, Spider-Man 50.
Okay.
First Kingpin. I needed it for my set, but that's 2 books. I mean, I'll still buy American books. I'll still buy vintage books, but my days of having pulls at stores or buying, spending like $500 at a con, those days are over. I'm not interested in those books anymore. They're boring to me. I hate to say it. They're easy to me. I get more dopamine push when I'm picking something up like that damn Hellboy right there. Tell me a Hellboy collector that doesn't see that Russian Hellboy in 9.6 and go, holy shit, I have to have one.
Yeah, when you sent that picture over, I was like, dude, that is a sick cover right there. I love the lettering and everything of that.
Yeah, the way the Russians used the font style still put it in acrylic. I mean, it's badass. So let's talk about the early movement real quick.
Yes.
So again, there have been people picking up foreign edition books for a long time, but it was really started by 2 guys, Liam Sturgis and Hector Banda. Liam was in Canada, and Hector was here in Texas. He was from Mexico, so he had a good understanding of what all was put out in Mexico. And so him and this guy Liam, they get this idea that, they see like the books that were the first sets getting built, Spider-Man 129, Spider-Man 300, Spider-Man 252, Batman 227. They had liked those covers, and so they specifically had started the process of seeking out those books from all over the world, and they were doing it for years without anyone paying them any kind of attention. In fact, if we have any CGC fanboys, I'm gonna talk a little bad about CGC. The CGC boards were not really a nice place for this style of collecting early on. It was it was poo-pooed. They were, they said these are just reprints. Why do we weren't given, the guys that were doing this were not really given a real kind of nice place to grow this part of the hobby there. Mainly what we use CGC for was to communicate with each other. And we had behind the scenes, there was about 50 really hardcore guys around the world and in the USA that were doing this early on. But the first 2 were Liam and Hector. Okay. And they were the 2 that kind of took me under their wing and showed me the ropes and showed me how to research this stuff. You can't, there is no Overstreet. So again, we get back to that saying, you can't collect what you don't know exists. In the early days, you would set up 2 screens, you pull up your Google Translate, and let's say we were looking for the Greek 300. We had an idea that the Greek 300 existed, but we couldn't, we kept seeing issues that bounced around it, right? So finally, Hector went in there, said, hey, this is the book I'm looking for. He showed an American Spider-Man 300, and he told these guys in the forum, using Google Translate into Greece, first person that shows me a scan of this book in your language is going to get PayPal $35 like that. And so those were tricks that we used to find out what was going on there. A lot of the foreign sites had foreign databases, so you could do research. You could find out what was in the book, but you had to use Google Translate. You had to talk to these collectors at these international forums in their language. You had to go in there and be respectful, and you had to say, hey, I might be an American, but I'm really interested in this stuff. What can you guys tell me about this? What can where can I possibly pick one up? Can you help? Finder's fees, shipping costs, horror stories of customs taking a razor and slicing shit right through. Bad shipping. I'll give you an example. People are probably tired of hearing me talk.
No, this is great information. So we love the history that you're going over here, because we don't know this history. I'm sure a lot of our viewers don't know either. So this is fascinating, man. And I love that venom in your back right there.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so This Spider-Man 300. At one time, I owned like eight of these. Right. This is the nicest one I was ever able to pull out of Italy. I paid $30 for it, and the guy shipped it in a manila envelope only. No backing board, no bubble wrap.
Oh, jeez.
No box, no nothing. Just a manila envelope, right? The problem with this book is it is a cardstock cover. It cannot press. Also, bag and board culture. Bag and board culture didn't hit a lot of these countries until way later. You know, here in America, by the early 60s, collectors were putting shit in bags, right? There are still collectors in Italy to this day that just put their books in stacks. What happens when you stack books without bags or boards? They scuff. What happens to a book like this? It gets the shit scuffed out of it. What's the highest top of the census for this book? A 9.6, there's only one. Next comes 2 9.4s. Those are it. Those are the top 3 on the census, and all the other ones that have been graded fall below that into the 9s or the 8.5s, right? So this is a top 3 book, and it was sent to me in a manila envelope.
Crazy.
Those are the things.
Right.
That's
what we talked about earlier on this, is when we talk about, you know, sometimes there's like this grade snobbing. Oh, I want a 9.8, not a 9.6. When we're talking about these situations where, you know, they're shipping in a manila envelope, or there's not that very many print run to begin with, they don't take care of the comics there. You're not getting, you know, near mint copies coming your way, and you gotta kind of throw that out the door, right?
Yeah, you gotta. Okay, so this grade snobbery stuff that we have here in this country, you gotta check that at the door, because if you don't check that, go away. You're not going to be in this part of the hobby. Just go away, because it's going to be impossible.
Yeah.
Right?
So let me ask this. One is, here's the Superman shirt. It is a copy of Superman Annual #1, and I live in Houston, Texas. And you said you're from Texas.
No, I'm New Mexico. Las Cruces,
you're New Mexico.
1971. What up, buddy? Santa over here, bro.
But I bought this shirt in Seattle, Washington, when I was visiting up there probably 10 years ago. So
nice.
Anyway, so you're throwing around some terms like, you know, ancient history, things like that. Yeah, La Cruces is from New Mexico.
Woo!
He's actually in La Cruces, New Mexico. So
he's in Las Cruces, is where I went to college for a little bit. Spent many a time down in Juarez.
But you know, you're saying things like ancient. I think you said ancient history or something. But really, when you're saying ancient history, if you're using Google Translate, you're really talking about the last 20 years.
Yeah.
So what I'm curious of, and this is something I've tried researching, because you know, I've mentioned that I collect these things, these British annuals.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
You know, which have an interesting history all their own.
Yep.
Dealing with the Christmas season and stuff and the way they put them out. But when did I know Mexico was printing was printing comics in the 70s? I mean, where do you have a time?
They were printing foreign editions from the 40s. There's golden age foreign editions.
Really?
Yep.
So can you kind of talk a little bit about that history of
so
stuff? I'd love to hear a little of that.
So basically, you know, all the big companies had been licensing. So licensing, just like it is now, is a cash cow, right? If you've got something popular, you're going to license it. So if you go back into Brazil, even in Europe, Spain, there are actually fascist Superman comics that were printed in Spain during the fascist. So they took, you know, because they thought of Superman as like this capitalist propaganda, right? So they like altered him and did all that, but they took the art. So you've got foreign editions that started happening as early as the 40s.
Wow.
Okay?
And I do remember a little bit about some Dale comics that were foreign editions. Now that you're bringing some of that up, I do remember a few of those. Back
yes, there was.
I mean, this was in the 80s or 70s, maybe, when I remember hearing or seeing these.
Almost every, I mean, Indux is one of the big Walt Disney kind of comic collector websites.
Yeah.
You would be amazed how much Disney stuff got pushed out and licensed everywhere. Like, if you're a Disney comic book collector and you really like seek out books hardcore, I mean, I don't think there's a country on the planet that, well, probably countries behind the Iron Curtain in Soviet Russia. But so, yes, so there's a huge history. There's Golden Age Brazilian early Marvels, and I mean pre-code horror, and I mean,
wow, really?
It's almost, yeah. I got stuff here that if you're into like pre-code horror, I got some stuff here from Jaime Cortez, which was sort of like Brazil's Frazetta.
Yeah.
From all over the place. This is a Brazilian horror right here. It's O Vampiro. This is a Jaime Cortez. I double bag my stuff, so sometimes it's hard to see.
No, we see it perfect. Yeah,
it's good.
Amazing.
Amazing artwork.
And so the pre-code horror guys, they go nuts when they find Brazil, because then they go, oh shit, this is like from the 50s, but it goes all the way back into the 40s. I have another one here. Yeah, I got so much eye candy. I think I got so much eye candy.
So which ones, because we know there's a lot of the main countries will have, a lot of the main countries, like you said, license out along pretty close the same time that they came out here. But isn't there like countries now that are like in the past 10 years just now producing like a Hulk 181 or something like that they're just printing now?
Yeah, there is. There's more modern editions of the books. The difference is, this is really the difference. Once the internet came in, right? Once there was able to, basically the more modern editions of a lot of these books are kind of boring because the publishers don't have all the leeway to do whatever the heck they want. So you lose variation. So for set builders, when you're building sets, novelty and variation is the fuel that drives the set builders' goal.
Of course.
Right? And what happens in the more modern era is that, Disney and Warner Brothers, which is DC, they have an army of lawyers making sure that every I is dotted and T is crossed and blah, 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 blah. Whereas back even, like that Batman, that McFarlane Batman, even in the 80s, we were still dealing with, what were the early internet? It was like the .serve or the dot. I don't remember. It's just harder to police your license holders, right? So yes, there are modern editions of, like, say, a Hulk 181 that comes out, but it's boring because it's safe, right? It's not this. Here, zoom in on this. You were talking about the non-canon, right? The Mexican non-canon run. So in the Mexican non-canon run, they liked Gwen Stacy. They really didn't like Mary Jane. Now there's two trains of thought on the non-canons. One, so the Mexican editors and artists, they swear, okay, they flew to New York, they talked with Transworld, they did all that stuff, they talked with Marvel, they got permission to do their own out-of-canon stories according to them. Now, one of the reasons that it happened, a lot of people say it's because the Mexicans preferred Gwen Stacy over Mary Jane, and they didn't like the fact that in 121 she died, right? Now that's kind of like a oral history, or like a lot of people back from that time, and we know the artist Duran, a lot of them say that wasn't necessarily the case. The case was they were publishing Spidey bi-monthly, right? So they were catching up to the American run, and Spidey was their bread and butter, so they didn't want to lose out. So what I actually think, it's like one of those things. Oh, okay, so let me tell you the other part. The other part is we've talked to Roy Thomas about this. People have asked Roy Thomas about this, and Roy Thomas says, hell no, that wasn't approved. No one would have approved any of that stuff. We would have told them, too bad, you're not allowed to take Spidey and go write your own damn stories. So who do you believe, right? What I think is that the truth is somewhere in the middle, like it so often is in the world. In the middle is, I think the Mexican creators and editors flew to New York. They sat down with Marvel. They made the deal, but they didn't. But the licensing department wasn't communicating with the editorial or the bullpen or any of that stuff. It just wasn't about that for them. This was just purely about money, right? And so I think that the truth is that they did have permission, and that's when they went off. Okay, so zoom in on this one more time again, Jeff. This is an interesting key, not just because Gwen's booty. I mean, look at that booty. And see, that's the beauty of the non-canon run too. Think about it. In the 70s, the ideal feminine form was Twiggy. Remember the model Twiggy? Yep. Mexico didn't roll that way, baby. They wanted bean and rice-fed Latina with curves, and boy, Duran gave us that. Look at that booty. So, but what makes this a key, do you see that guy lying in his own blood?
Yeah.
This is the first time that blood graces a Spider-Man cover, and it's not an American book. First time it graces a Spider-Man cover is in the Mexican non-canon run in the early 70s. That's what makes this book so important.
That is pretty cool, man.
It's the first time. Because, see, the Comics Code wouldn't have let that slide. The Comics Code didn't start allowing blood on covers until the 80s.
That's very true.
This is why we collect foreign books, man, because the stories are so fascinating, so interesting. These aren't books that you go to a con and see I've seen on the wall 10 million times already.
No, for sure. You look how crazy that we get for a newsstand variant or a price variant, or just a little tiny thing has changed. Like, oh, it's different. That's so cool. It's different. And you look at something like this and the history that goes along with it. And like I said, it's not something you can go to any convention and grab those. That was a really cool part of his collection. Dark Wolf, how's it going? Appreciate you coming by.
And let me talk about print run too, because this is important. America's print runs for Spidey in the 70s were probably, I don't know, I've heard numbers thrown around, 700,000, 800,000. I forget that website that's got the lists of the print runs, but it's a lot, right? What do you think a print run was like in the Netherlands? Do you know how many people are in the Netherlands? About as many people as in New Jersey. Can you imagine what the print runs were for a book out of the Dutch Netherlands or a book out of Italy? Italy's got a lot of people, but you could probably fit Italy in Florida. Imagine from a pure print run perspective, I'll give you an example. The Spidey 300. Now, the Italian publisher Edizione Star, they were hot, in the 70s. They were printing a ton of Marvel stuff. But they were printing for the Italian market. The Italian print runs had to have been fractions of what the American print runs were. Fractions. I mean, I'm talking 10%, 20%, 30% maybe if you're lucky. In some instances, in like provinces like French Canada, I've got a cool French-Canadian book right here. Everyone knows Thanos' first appearance, right? Iron Man 55.
Iron Man, yep.
This is the French-Canadian edition of Iron Man 55. This was only printed for a province in Canada, right? That province is Quebec. These were not printed on newsstands. These were only sold at newsagents and newsstands, or they were sold in comic book stores. So at that time in the 70s, you had comic book stores in Canada, but they only sold American books, Canadian whites, and the Canadian price variants, right? They didn't sell these. These were only sold on newsstands and news agents in the province of Montreal. The print runs on these were minuscule compared to an Iron Man 55 American. For every 100 Iron Man 55s, there might be one L'Invincible Iron Man. And this was number 10 in the Iron Man run in the province of French Canada. This was also printed in the 70s. The Editions Heritage, see the EH up there? That's what that stands for. A lot of their books are the closest, if not closer, than we're talking within like a month or two of the American release. So these are like truly vintage, right? So print run is a huge deal. And so, you know that whole check your grade snobbery at the door thing. Oftentimes you're just happy to get an edition. You don't even care what grade it is. You got to think about it like this too. Even for the guys that are connected on some of these tougher, harder books, you might only have a buying opportunity once or twice a year. So if that book is a lower grade, what the hell are you going to do? You know what I mean? I ain't no expert, man. I told you I'm an enthusiast.
He's an enthusiast.
You want to see a cool, and and the other thing that got people into the foreign book world too is SIGs. SIG collectors love having unique items. One of a kind items. Oaks. My buddy Stephen.
Oh, the crow.
This is a one of a kind item. When I showed this to James O'Barr, it was the first time he had ever actually held one. This is the Greek crow one. And James had seen a picture of it on the internet, but he'd never actually held one. So I had my Greek contact in Greece on standby. His name's Gabriel Tompalatis. And I told James, I wanted him to sign this book, and I was trying to think of a cool thing to do. So I told him, I said, hey, what is your favorite saying from the Crow, from the first couple issues? Do you have a favorite saying? He goes, oh, yeah, that's easy. And I said, well, what is it? Fears for the enemy, fear and bullets, right? I had that translated by my buddy in Greece into Greek script and had James O'Barr sign it. In Greece, fears for the enemy, fear and bullets. And, getting to show creators foreign editions is really cool because, even they get bored of seeing the same old books all the time. You show them something they've never seen before, that gets their attention.
Oh, absolutely. Like you said, he's never had for the hundreds of thousands of people that he has met and people asked him to autograph. Not a single person did what you did.
So that's the other neat thing about this part of the hobby too, right? If 95% of the hobby is unaware that it's even going on, this is one of those few places within the hobby that you can build some really unique and fascinating collections for pennies on the dollar of what you'd have to do on the American side.
Yeah, so that brings up a good point. So some of those books, like the 300s that you have, how much? I know it's going to vary between countries, but is it 50% less, 20% less? How much is it, the price difference?
It depends because some books are rarer than others. Some books you can basically ask whatever you want for them, and knowledgeable people will know. Some books drastically, significantly cheaper. It just depends. Now, what's happened in the foreign edition world is the same thing that's happening in the hobby as a whole. We're seeing all the boats lift up from the price increases. So prices have gotten drastically more expensive, but there's still deals to be had. The problem is without a price guide or without, a real understanding of the general history of a lot of these books, for a buyer, Shelby, like you said, you don't know if you're getting ripped off. You don't know if you're paying too much. You don't know if you're paying too little. The only guys that have that information, it's up here in the noodle, is all us old guys. And so
there's no fair market value you can go look up and see what it is. And
I'm sitting here and I just did a quick search on eBay, and again, I'm Fantastic Four collector, so I did Fantastic Four Mexican, and there are comics
there's some
located in Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
So right there, I don't know if I'm ever going to get the book if I buy it.
Right. You're not building a rapport. You don't know, right?
Most of the sellers are pretty. There are horror stories, but you'd be surprised they're a lot less than you imagine.
Yeah, but like there's a book from 1981, which reprint. Sorry, I shouldn't say reprint, but
edition
of the first appearance of him, which is Warlock,
nice.
Which for us appeared way back in the 1960s. This is 1981.
It's a Novedades version, so it happened twice. So there's a La Prensa version, that's the vintage one, and then there's the 80s version. Now the 80s, if you notice it, look at the coloring on that.
Yeah,
funky coloring, right?
Yeah,
still a very in-demand issue. The collectors from the 80s love their Novedades, so that's something that you also see. So the license will move to different publishers as time goes on. So La Prensa had the Marvel license in the 70s, okay? Then it moved in the 60s and the 70s. So La Prensa had the Marvel license in the 60s and the 70s. Then it moved to Editions Opiesa, which was Mac in the 70s. And then by the late 70s, early 80s, that license then moved over to the Novedades, and then it ended up with Vid. So, yeah, you would have to know that stuff, Shelby. You would have to know that that's actually one printed in the 80s. Yeah. And so, but
so does that mean there's two versions of that then? That same comic, there's two versions of it.
Yep, there's two versions, and both are very unique, and both are cool. And if you're building the set, you got to have them both.
Right. Well, yeah, and this is a fine copy, and it's pretty beaten up, and they want $35.
That's for a key Novedades. That's reasonable. If you like that book, version. I'd buy it. Yep. Depending on condition, if it's got...
It's rough. I mean, it's fine minus, and I agree with them.
Then I would say, in this instance, Shelby, I'd hit buy it now if you like that book. Because the keys are only going one direction. They're going up. And if you can get good foreigns at a good price... let me give you an example. Okay, Shelby, do you want to get your mind blown real quick?
That's why we're here, buddy.
I love having my mind blown.
Let me show you one of the toughest FF ones. There are only two known in North America.
Well, and that's what I'm looking at too. I'm looking at like a Fantastic Four annual number 2, $500. Oh wow, yeah, super.
Look at that.
Yeah.
that is South African's own Republican Press Fantastic Four number 1. Now this was printed in the 80s, and it doesn't have the guts. It's got like FF 56 or something else in there. But Republican Press did a really interesting number on the FF1. The weird coloring. Look at the weird how there's like just a spot of blue in there. And this has like an amazing blue,
but then that black duotone is freaking
crazy, right?
Yeah.
There are only 2 of these that we know of that we can prove in North America. The other one does not have the poster. This one does. This book, as far as I'm concerned, I would have to start talking about G's and the multiple to even think about selling it. And do you know how much I paid for it? Take a guess.
25 cents, the cover price.
I bought it for $100, and it was the best $100 I've ever spent.
Wow.
Well, and yeah, I mean, it's like I'm looking, like I said, here at this Fantastic Four Annual 2, and it's obviously an early printing. It's not a 1980s.
If it's a La Prensa, how much are they asking for it?
$500.
Depending on condition, the early La Prensa stuff, the real early La Prensa stuff is tough. We're talking early 60s.
It is. You can see the stamp on the cover that says La Prensa.
Yep.
It's got the green stamp on the cover with a lion.
Yep. La Prensa. Yep. The lion is the logo of La Prensa. That's how you're always going to know you're dealing with super vintage Mexican. Marvel. Oops, sorry. Hope my camera don't go out.
See, we just learned something. We look for the lion stamp.
Look for the lion stamp. That is a La Prensa. I want to show you something else. Let's see here.
I don't think I paid $500 for my FF Annual American version of FF Annual 2.
And that's the thing. Some foreign editions are already beating the American in grade and price.
Right, well, you got to think the print run on the Mexican one has got to be so much smaller.
Well, no, not necessarily, because the Mexican ones were printed for all of Spanish-speaking Latin America.
Oh.
So they had huge print runs. But how many survived? Not a whole lot, because in Mexico, there is this cultural thing called cuentitos. A cuentito is like a little kid's thing, right? So just like here, we had issues where, comic collectors considered geeks, or, they didn't have any girlfriends, or, all that bullshit that I think is all bullshit. But there was that kind of stigma in Mexico like we had here in America, but it was even worse. So as you grew up as a child in Mexico, at a certain point in time, your cuentitos, you had to let go. You weren't going to have them anymore. And if you did save them or keep them, Mexico's a very machismo culture. And if you did keep them, people would look at you a little weird. They're like, why are you still reading comic books or keeping comic books? So I think culturally, you have to remember, culturally is another aspect to how these books were treated, saved, collected. And in Mexico, you don't want to be an adult male and to still be seen playing with cuentitos. So a lot of collections got sold, given to little brothers, thrown away. Does that make sense?
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And did they have the bag and board culture then too, or did that come later as well?
That is another one that came.
Because it's a kids thing, right? They didn't care. They didn't take care of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hebrew, Israeli, 122. Spine is on the left. You read right to left Hebrew, just like Arabic.
Arabic and Hebrew.
Yep. So this book we've actually seen CGC screw up and slab Israeli or Arabic books backwards because they're too stupid to understand that
that's CGC. That doesn't surprise me.
Super, super cool books. The books from the Middle East, the ones in Arabic, a majority of them were printed in Lebanon, also Egypt. And then, of course, the Israeli Hebrew books are awesome. This is a really great book. The Brazilian books, we were talking about the Portuguese. Who doesn't like a Batman 227?
Yeah.
Right?
Now you're talking dirty.
This is dirty right here. Now, notice that pastel-y coloring. Isn't that cool?
Yeah.
If you were to compare this with the American.
I love the logo. The logo's freaking awesome, man.
Yeah, I mean, this is a badass book. And the reason is that it's black and white on the interiors. Marvel did not send the color sets to Ebal, the publisher. So they left it up to Ebal, the publisher, to colorize the covers however they saw fit. They did it in funky ways. They did it all kinds of different ways. But they did it with a kind of pastel-y coloring. And when you see this book, if you remember the American 227, remember it's kind of cluttered with shit. It's got a Robin on one side, and it's just cluttered. The Brazilian Ebal 227, because of that cool kind of pastel-y, and then you also notice that the clouds are different. They're thicker than in the American version. But there's just something about
it doesn't even look like Neil Adams' artwork.
No, it doesn't at all.
Yeah.
Isn't that
looks way cooler.
Neil Adams, yeah.
I've told people this before, and I talked with Neil about this. I told him, I said, you know what, Neil? I said, I bet you if you put up a poster of the American book and this and sold them at the same price, I bet you a lot more people would buy the Brazilian. This is one of those instances, again, where the foreign publisher, I think, did a cleaner, better job with the cover than the Americans did.
I agree.
I mean, again, we're getting into the the intricacies and the interesting things about foreigns. They also did a lot of foreign publishers did some funky, weird stuff. Look at this Wolverine #1, how it's cropped in. You know, you've got your classic cinema artwork. You see how it's like a close crop? This is from Spain. This is a Los Comics de El Sol. This was given away free in a newspaper. It was a newspaper supplement. And I can promise you a whole bunch of these got thrown away.
Oh, yeah.
We were talking Arabic. Here's another Arabic. This is the Star Wars Arabic. Star Wars 1. This was from a publisher called Biset El Rit. Again, spine is on the left, not the right. This was actually pulled from a bind. You know, you want to talk about condition snobbery? This thing's whole spine is shot to hell. I ended up paying like $250 for it, I think, and I didn't even have to blink an eye. Interesting thing about this publisher, they were based out of Lebanon, and it was kind of a small boutique-y publisher that got the license, right? They were doing a lot of sci-fi and different stuff. They did some Star Trek, some Grenadier, so they were doing some Japanese stuff. But anyway, they were doing these books right smack in the middle of the Lebanese Civil War in the 80s. So how ironic is it that this little Lebanese publisher, as artillery rounds were bouncing around all throughout the city, was doing an Arabic edition of a space drama Civil War? Irony. It's a lot of irony there. So this, and I mean, the colorization is just insane.
That looks like a Japanese sci-fi, like you said. You can tell that influence in there.
Incredible.
So, I mean, and that's the thing. It's not just the books themselves, right? This is a Star Wars foreign edition. It's a badass book, but the book also, and one of my favorite stories. You're going to get one of my favorite stories. So the books, you have to see the books as like cultural representations of like pop culture, but reflected through the eyes of the culture and the country and the language that it's going through. The neat thing about the Republican Press books is these were getting printed right at smack in the middle of apartheid. Do you guys remember what apartheid was?
Yep.
So, if you're a fan of history, sorry, I'm going to spill my beer. If you're a fan of history, these books are like historical documents.
Yeah.
They're not just comic books. They transcend that. And let me give you an example of how a book can be on the right side of history. Republican Press, okay, so they have the free poster in there. Do you see that thing where it says "End Competition" inside?
Yep.
In South Africa, apartheid was going strong. They were trying to do this bullshit 2 nations, 1 system, or 2 systems, 1 nation. Just this bullshit crap that, you know, here in America, we're trying to pull that crap in during the Jim Crow in the South and all that. It's bullshit. You know, it wasn't equal. But they were trying to play that off. So the way media worked in South Africa is they'd have a white version and then an African version, right? So like say there was like like Better Homes and Gardens. There would be the white version and then there'd be one for the Africans. And say they had a TV show, right? There'd be kind of the white version and there'd be they couldn't show the racist mixing, right? But that was more like at the top of the media diet, so to speak. Now, South Africa had censors. They had censors that would go through a lot of the media, and if something didn't show the apartheid system in a positive light, they censored it. But comic books were considered throwaway entertainment. They were considered trash, right? So Republican Press, hey, Me Comics, what's up? So Republican Press, with the lower kind of forms of media, lower end magazines, regional newspapers, stuff like that, the censors kind of left them alone to do their own thing. So they could choose whether to uphold apartheid or not. Republican Press was pretty awesome. So they had these competitions for kids, and you could send in a Polaroid or a picture of yourself, and you would be put in for a drawing to win things like Walkmans, bikes, scooters, all kinds of different stuff. And what they would do on the posters is they would show pictures of all the winners. And guess what? In Republican press comic books, you can see little pictures of Africans, mixed race, and white kids all in the same media. They were on the right side of history. They chose specifically not to show
the separation
of race. They are on the right side of history. When you own a Super Comics comic book, you can be proud in knowing you're not just owning the book. You're owning a piece of a company that was on the right side of history, not on the wrong side of history. That's not just a comic book. It's culturally relevant in all kinds of other ways. So you can find these same stories all throughout the foreign world.
Yeah. Well, obviously you've not watched any of our episodes because we kind of discussed that quite a bit of what the history of not just the comic history of that, but how really when you look at the world and what's going on around, shapes what is occurring in terms of those comics, right?
Yep.
Like with Star Wars or was a big one.
Big one. Yeah, context matters. And remember, as Americans, we like to think we're always on the right side of history. Well, I hate to break it to you guys, but that's not the case.
Right.
Nope. Not the case at all. This is a perfect example. Remember Star Wars? You said Star Wars, right? This is the Greek Star Wars 1. Oh. Now, the thing with the Greeks...
Look at that.
Was
amazing.
That we supported the military junta in Greece. So... Oh, shoot. I didn't need to take it all out. Hold on. So because we supported the military junta, there were a lot of little Greek kids that their dad or their grandpa was taken away by scary men in uniforms, and they never returned. Okay? So in Greece in the 70s, there wasn't a whole lot of goodwill towards Americans. And then Cabanas Hellas comes out and starts pumping out American books. So imagine if you're a little Greek kid whose dad or grandpa never came back, was killed by the military junta in Greece, and then you see Captain America on the newsstand.
Oh, geez.
What are you going to do? You're going to say, screw those Americans. The Cabanas Hellas Marvels are so interesting because they did not have a good run in Greece. They didn't sell very well. Not many survived, and all the ones that got returned to the publisher got pulped. These are rare Bronze Age books. And when you can own a Greek Star Wars 1, that's badass. But do know that because of our support of Greece's military junta, because the difference was there was leftist governments in Greece that we were fighting against, just like the CIA was fighting down in Central and South America. We weren't on the right side of history in Greece at the time that this book came out. So another...
And it shows.
This is the rarest Spider-Man 300 on planet Earth. At any given time, I think we can prove of maybe under 50 that we can say we know exist. Maybe even 40. You think a 9.8 300 is rare. There's probably 1,000 American Spider-Man 300s for every one, just one that exists of the Filipino. This is a ghost. This is the Filipino 300. And I've seen this book make foreign collectors lose their minds. Literally go crazy over it. Like go nuts because they're trying so hard to find it. This is the Icelandic 238 first hobby. You want to talk about a low print run? Think about Iceland. You know what the print runs there? I've heard experts in Iceland say about this book. They think the print runs were as low as 7,000. Somewhere underneath 10G copies were printed, and that's it. This is the rarest edition of the first hobby on planet Earth.
Does that have the tattoos in it?
Icelandic. No tattoos. So
Wow.
Yeah. Any questions from the chat? I don't know if
I hadn't seen any or anything except for the request to see my shirt.
That's a cool shirt.
See my incredible body is what it was.
No, there's a lot of response to the amazing stories, man.
Yeah. I think everybody's just blown away by the incredible stories, and I'm sure we'll get a lot of views. We usually get maybe 10, 15 people in here, but then in a week we usually get 80 to 90 views.
Right.
So
yeah, we'll get hit up later for some questions, and that's one thing I'm excited about. Obviously, you're just a mountain of information here, and we just love listening to these stories and seeing those awesome books that you're presenting here. But that's why we did this in 2 parts, because we knew we weren't going to fit anything. We know we're running out of time right now. And this, we just wanted to go over to the history part of it and everything you're bringing to the table and hearing those cool stories. And then next week, because I know I'm going to get a ton of questions of like, well, where can I get them? What can I do? What are the ones I want to go for? What are the pricing? All that stuff. Just so everyone knows, Matt's information is down below. His IG is down below in the link. Also, he's got a killer Facebook group for foreign collectors. So make sure you click on that one and you read everything in there, and you subscribe to that one, because that's where you're going to build that community that we're talking about, and that's where you need to kind of go to get all this information. And then obviously the magazine as well. Like Joker's saying, that the mind is blown.
I sent you a message on IG. Definitely, I want to know about the magazine. I want to get where I can get the back issues and everything and stuff.
Well, it's all digital. So we ran out of physical copies long ago. So we made it 8 issues. And if you go to our group, we have like in Facebook groups, they have a separate tab. We have a separate tab that has downloads to all the digital PDFs. And there's so much. We did some neat things, you guys. I mean, we did, like, for instance, the 300. We had this section in the back. I wish I still had physical copies because it's so neat to hold it in your hand. But we had a section called the Limelight, where we would highlight sets and have collectors talk about what they were doing. This set of 300s right here that are all signed, this was Hector Bonda's set. And super cool, man. Yeah, I mean, the magazine was a real labor of love. And it's just, life happens. We got busy. I had, I started popping out, or my wife started popping out kids, and it's like, we didn't have the time, and
we have to get involved, and who knows, maybe some people in the community that want to know more, or dedicate some time. Definitely.
I think we're going to need more in another show. Honestly, I think we're going to need 2 more shows. I think we need to have.
I'm cool with that.
Yeah,
I think we need to do another show where we just kind of, where I think maybe, since everyone's going to have this is what I think we should do. Everyone that's watching this show that has questions or specific questions, send them to Jeff or Shelby. I'll come back on another show where it'll be mainly just answering questions.
Q&A.
And then we'll do a 3rd show, and I'll bring in my guys from Global Comic Safari, and we can get into more advanced topics on market.
Perfect.
What's happening right now within the market.
I love it. Emmy Comics, just so we don't forget about you. We talked about this a little bit. You got to kind of throw condition out the window a little bit.
Check your great snobbery at the door. It has to be checked. Because for a lot of these foreigns, they're so rare that, if I have a buying op for an Icelandic 238 first hobby, but it's got some writing on the cover, and it was my only buying op for the year, am I gonna turn it down? It could be another 2 or 3 years before another copy comes up. No, I'm gonna buy it, and if a nicer one comes up, then I'm gonna buy that later and sell this or trade it. So you gotta change your mind a little bit and get around the whole condition snobbery, because in the foreign niche part of this hobby, it's not going to do you any good. In fact, it's going to make you lose. It's going to make you lose out on buying opportunities and books and whatnot, and you're not going to have a very big collection. Basically.
Right. Well, like I said, just the history of all this stuff and dive into just the Mexican version of stuff and how they have price variance in Spain. It's just amazing how far you can dive down and learn about all this stuff. So there's rabbit holes left and right you can go down.
And
left
I
and
love the way
right.
you just rattle off those Mexican names and know the history of the licensing and stuff. I mean,
Yep.
like I said, I've already learned something. I know to look for that
Lion.
Yeah, look for the La Prensa Lion. That's going to be the true vintage Marvel of the Mexican books. The true vintage Marvel of the DC Mexicans are Navarros. Navarros, you can always tell them because of the triangle in the top corner. This is another.
But we know 80s and 90s stuff is what's coming back around as popular.
This is another.
God, look at that!
Look at that!
Incredible.
This we only know of about around 10 copies of this Mexican Mr. Freeze.
Wow.
We can only prove. I think it's like 8 or 9 that we can prove with where we've seen an actual copy. There's probably more out there, but you want to talk about a rare Batman Golden Age villain key?
I'm not in PC, but I got a nerd boner right now.
This is a nerd boner, dude. When I saw this, I couldn't hit buy it now fast enough. We know that it escaped to Spain, so you see a stamp up there that says Juvenile Revista. So a lot of the Mexican books that made it to Spain got stamped basically saying Juvenile Revista. It's a kid version, basically, is what that means. But yeah, I mean, if I'd been a condition snob on this book, I mean, I saw it and I don't even think there was a scan of the back cover. I just bought it. I mean, I spent a lot. It cost me $1,000, but
wow,
you know, yeah. Right. So I hope that
we're going to publicize this a lot more. I think now that Jeff and I do tend to be a little bit slow sometimes, but I think we're going, since we know that we're going to plan out a couple of more of these, we will not only see that freeway.
We'll gather all the questions. We'll get you back on for another episode.
We'll get some get some of the big people in here. So hey, thank you so much, Matt. Really appreciate your time and everything. I know Jeff has money to go make.
Yeah, and I want to do a special shout out to Jason, Southern Comic Geek, for putting us in touch with you. So again, he's a friend of the show and friend of the community as well. So thank you, Jason. Appreciate that. Matt, it's always a pleasure talking with you, man. I know we can go on forever for this. We'll be back again. We'll get some more questions. Keep doing what you're doing, educating everyone, man, and bringing this foreign goodness to everyone, because these are really cool stories and these are really cool comics.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right. Thank you again, everyone. Shelby, thank you again. Another good episode here. And we'll be back for another one next week.
All right. As long as we carry this series on, we're going to do it on Jeff's channel. So we don't confuse everybody with this. We don't want you to miss any information. And with that, I'm saying peace, love, and comics.
Comics.
Thank you all.